Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. First things I want to do is that a lot of times I get a single viewer on a live stream. It's pathetic, I know, and they only watch for 12 seconds. So if you're about to turn off right now because it's been 12 seconds, can you let me know in the chat or in the comments like what it is that actually convinced you to go through that extra effort, like to not even give it 30 seconds or a minute. Don't be afraid of hurting my feelings. Like, I really would like to know that feedback more than anything. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. And I did play a little bit over the weekend, and I kind of want to sort of rush. We don't have a ton of news today, so I can work on non-video game content projects and finish some finished project out if I can today. Let's see, should I re-roll any of this? I mean, theoretically you could re-roll this Swordcraft and Dragoncraft, but this Swordcraft and this Swordcraft overlap, so if we just play Swordcraft and play Ranked, we should be able to do fairly quickly and fairly well. Maybe get all the daily quest stuff done today on top of the arena runs. Here we have 3 ticket packs, so we'll go ahead and just open those 3 packs. I doubt I have any other ticket packs, but we'll check. For the accountability section, I've been playing Dead Space 3, trying to work my way through it. It kind of drags its feet in the back half of it. It also hides a lot of bugginess in the back half of it. It's also hiding most of that bugginess in optional missions. There have consistently been cases where I've had to turn off VSync or turn on VSync to be able to climb up and down ladders and not fall through the ground, which is the main issue. But then turn off VSync after I've climbed up and down a ladder so that I can have a smooth frame rate experience fighting the enemies. It's not a good engine, to say the least. Dead Space 3 also hit the point where they have first revealed the big surprise at the end of Dead Space 3, and they basically just explain the story to you right after you get a codex, and it's just awful. It's tell instead of show very much. It recontextualizes the make us whole phrase that has been repeated throughout the beginning of the first game and the second game in a bad way. It's just ridiculous, completely. There are also scenes where you see your co-op character, and your co-op character seems to appear in some cutscenes when he's necessary, and then seems to be completely missing in other cutscenes when he's not necessary, which makes it seem like there's very possibly a completely different experience, or I would say at least 70 to 80% different experience for people who are playing the co-op character versus Isaac, which that's just content you won't ever be able to see as a single player, and most people are going to have to play Dead Space 3 as a single player in 2021. Also, there's absolutely co-op levels that you can't play without a co-op partner. This Dead Space 3 is kind of one of the few games out there where you basically are being told to not even bother to play the game unless you have a co-op partner. And I'm so glad no other games really embrace that concept or that idea, because that could have been a nightmare, certainly. But yeah, most games when they give you co-op, it doesn't change the story any. It doesn't really do anything different. But that is really only one of many issues that are issues with Dead Space, where the game is just not particularly well designed to be an action game. If it's not well designed to be a horror game, it's definitely not a horror game. It doesn't compare well to something like Resident Evil 4, which is a action game, I would say, first and foremost. It doesn't compare well to like a horror game like Resident Evil 1 or 2, certainly. All the necromorphs, which they have slowly showing you like every necromorph you've ever seen in the series, but they're adding them in very brief sections at the very end of the game, and using them incredibly sparingly, which I think is kind of overly cautious.
Who will be my victim today? Are you worth
Guess
your
we'll
weight
just
in gold?
hit this.
Too slow.
And go ahead and hit that. But there definitely could have been room for a remaking of each of the necromorphs in the third game. They could have been somewhat like the previous necromorphs. They could have acted a lot like the previous necromorphs, but they could have looked fairly different. There are the only real necromorph that you have seen a lot of, or I've seen a lot of so far, is the starving human necromorph characters that replace the teenager slash kids necromorphs in the second game, which I'm sure they got flack for that, and that certainly would explain why that is not something that's still around. They showed up again. It'd be really hard to justify there being yeah, it would be really hard to justify there being a nursery in the location you're in the third game to then explain away the necromorph kids. But it wouldn't be that hard, frankly. You could do it with actually a single sentence of writing, since the ships that you're on in Dead Space 3 are hundreds of years before the Ishimura and the time that is happening now. You could just say they were generational ships because they had sub-light speed engines, and thus there was entire residential sections on the ships and kids on the ships and things like that. That would work fine as a concept.
I need more fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
1, 2, 3,
How's that? A fitting end.
and then
Die,
hit that.
That's enough.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Hit that.
One step closer to victory. Harder armor, stronger armor.
Actually, I guess I didn't need to do that, did I? These two alone will
Steel yourself.
Die.
do 3 damage to everything.
Maybe this time
Loyalty is
I can
ironclad.
flee completely.
Well, do I have anything else to talk about? No, I think I've been fairly good between the periods of falling asleep and having a lot of weird dreams. Like, the way I've been sleeping lately, I think it's been better, but it's also like I'm so used to having such incredibly poor quality sleep that I can't remember any dreams, or I potentially never even get to REM sleep. That it is weird now to fall asleep and maybe have an hour power nap, and that even be an option, and then actually have a dream and remember it. But yeah, besides that, the only other thing is I managed to do a thing called CH root or change root on my router, so that when my Windows PC using a program called WinSCP, I probably already talked about this, when it connects to via SSH to the router, it then gets put into a sandboxed partitioned part of the hard drive plugged into the router, and it is given just a limited number of commands to be able to
The uncharted desert awaits.
attack, to copy files and make sure the files are up to date and not do anything else, which is all it needs to do, which theoretically that creates safety. There is a thing specifically about embedded software where you have a program called BusyBox, which replaces a lot of commands so that they don't require any external libraries. And when you have that kind of setup, then everything in BusyBox is allowed. Whereas theoretically, some of the things in BusyBox you may not need. The main part of that's not probably that big of a deal, because BusyBox doesn't give you super like high level programs by any means, but you can't limit it down as much as you would like. There is theoretically a case where you might want to have a CH rooted user log in and only be able to say tell the date, the time, look at a specific folder, or look at the files in a specific folder, but not be able to move or rename or delete those files. And pretty much all of that is in BusyBox's problem. Also, because DDWRT routers are such an embedded system and a stripped down system, you're pretty much logging in as the root user anyways. There's not really enough support there to make a different kind of user, so setting different file permissions for different users is pretty much useless. Embedded systems just are not a full Linux build. Whereas my backup server, if I ever find enough energy to get back to working at that, if I was going to make a CH root environment like that, I could limit things a lot more. I'm not sure it really matters that much though. I assume that's in part how the, what are they called? Docker containers work. Yeah, they're called Docker containers. I assume that's how they work in part anyways, is that they change the root into a different environment to achieve sandboxing. Do I have anything else to talk about? No, I really don't think so. So let's just go through the video game news. The Steam Deck device, Gabe Newell has given some indication that they're really small M2 slots as far as the storage memory there. It does have an SD card too, but honestly, neither one of those solutions are going to get you a lot of space. Although it may not really matter how much space you have on it, because this first generation of this device is going to go for like 2 to 8 hours on its battery. depending on how demanding the graphics and the processing is on the specific game you're playing. So there's definitely some questionable specs on the Steam Deck, even more than when it was first announced. I could almost see myself ignoring the fact that it's slightly off of 720p and not getting a full 1080p. I'm not sure if we won't find out that when it is docked, it doesn't handle 1080p just fine. But battery life is going to be an issue. I could see immediately buying a Steam Deck and then buying a third-party modification that doubles or triples the battery life just by making it even bigger and heavier. And that's a concern to also be keep in mind, is because the I've totally lost my train of thought there. Oh yeah, I was talking about the weight of the Steam Deck. The Steam Deck is already like 3 times, it doubled to 3 times somewhere the weight of the Switch, which may not be a big deal on the initial lift or playing with it, but if you do get 4 or 6 hours with it and you're holding it in your hands that whole time, that could be very heavy, certainly. There is definitely an argument to be made that this concept of a Switch-like device is just compromised at the beginning. Like, there's no way to get around the fact that it is compromised, because okay, let's go ahead and hit that. Darn it. That didn't work well. Because if you really were to part out a mini ITX computer, then you have an upgrade path for a regular CPU and a regular graphics card. You have at least 1, if not 2, or even 3, or well, probably not 3, but 4 slots of RAM. Maybe it wouldn't be DDR5, so there might be a limitation there. But I could definitely see making an ITX computer that doesn't have the weight issue, that doesn't have the battery issue, because it's just not something that's expected. And with those 2 issues left to other devices, you probably would have a better experience. You get a cheap smart TV that's 1080p. You could probably get one for $300 or $400 as a TV, so you would be paying more there, of course. Mouses and keyboards and a good controller, all of that maybe gets you up to another $100, and then you probably would need to spend about $500 there. So the low-end super cheap Steam Deck probably is about $300 or more cheaper than building a mini ITX computer. But I would argue you have to look at the long haul usability of a Steam Deck compared to a mini ITX computer. The upgradability path and the functionality there. Instead of buying an incredibly small NVMe M2 stick, you could just get a slightly bigger physical size NVMe and put it in a mini ITX device, and probably have 500 to 512 gigabytes to a terabyte of space on a fast SSD. You probably only really need about 256 on the fast SSD, and then you could spend in a lot less money to get a lot more space on just a spinning hard drive. We don't even have to talk about DVD-ROMs, Blu-ray discs, or anything like that, because that wouldn't even be a factor. Cooling, of course, would be easier on a mini ITX. You almost certainly could get more bang for your buck just by building, having more room to build a mini ITX computer. And that comparison that I'm making right now, as far as a Steam Deck to mini ITX, is not even the best comparison, because you can go on slickdeals.net right now and get a $500 desktop ATX computer, some Alienware Dell thing. It won't be the greatest device ever, but it still probably would give you more for by taking up more space. And if you built an ATX instead of a mini ITX computer, then you've got all the space in the world, and it's going to be cheaper.
You crusty horseshoe.
So, the only thing that I think potentially could save the idea of the Steam Deck for a lot of people, like a lot of people are going to get it no matter what. We've already seen they're probably back ordered for 6 months to a year, with the games being released, the Steam Decks being released in December. So I wouldn't be surprised if all of 2022 is already back ordered, and there are people who are going to have to wait a year or longer for this device. And a year-old device at that point is going to be fairly crazy. There needs to be an update at some point at that level. And the second generation of the Steam Deck, I hope it does succeed. Certainly would catch my attention more. Better screen, better battery life, small tweaks here and there. Certainly all of that would be appreciated. Let's see. Storm, I suppose. Hit that, and hit that. DF Retro had an interesting coverage, and I feel like I might be shifting slightly away from watching Giant Bomb and more to watching DF Retro, which is more of a technical analysis site, and I think offers more unique insight, certainly. Although the only thing I really watch of Giant Bomb is the Bombcast, and they're not doing any other streams to replace the Beastcast, and they're doing other things that seem to be going in different directions. But yeah, they had an interesting coverage of the Zelda Skyward Sword Switch port, which was, for the most part, an indication of some major improvement compared to the original Skyward Sword game. Is there anything else to even talk about, though? No, it's been a slow weekend. At least for me, it's been a slow weekend. So let's just cover the video game news and be done. Here we have Power of Slide, which is a power slide trick racing game. I guess it would come down to price on this one. $11.99, English and Russian. This is probably nothing, but I'll put it on the fall list. We may do some fall list cleanup today. Okay. If we do this,
Let's speed things up.
and then we do this, and if we do this,
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
do we want to evolve this and do 2 more damage?
Too
No, I
slow.
don't think we do. Here we have a game on Steam called Ant Empire, which
Nothing personal. It's just
looks like nothing. $8.99, English only. Let's see. Gemetsu has Undernaut's Labyrinth of Yomi for PS5 listed at EB Games Canada, which I guess this is the game that was announced. I don't recognize this game though. Came out on Xbox One in June of 2020 in Japan. It clearly didn't get that much coverage. Plague Inc. has a scenario creator that is now out apparently. I think this has been out for a while, so I don't know why they're talking about it now. Okay. If we do this, we could do the runaway chariot and potentially die. We could do this and potentially die.
I need more fear, more terror.
got a job to do.
1, 2, 3.
How's that?
That was terrible. I don't know why I
Let's
did
speed
that.
things up.
One step closer to victory.
There's no time for you slugs.
My loyalty is ironclad.
Yeah, he's just gonna win there.
Enemy or no.
Here we have a game on Steam called Duelist, which just looks like a player versus player game of no interest. $2.99. Video Game Chronicles says the Zelda Skyward Sword HD credits confirm it was ported by the Twilight Princess's HD developer, Australian studio Tantalus Partners. Which you would think that people would have known that before they had to play the game and look at the credits, but honestly, I suspect there is a long list of third-party porters and developers that never get credited at all that work on video games. I suspect that there's at least 3 or 4 different video game companies that pretend like they make games when they really barely do at all. The former Nintendo of America, important to always point this out, boss Reggie Fils-Aimé confirms he's writing a book. It's called Disrupting the Game from Bronx to the Top of Nintendo. Will be published next year. I still have to put in my own personal opinion here. I don't feel like Reggie Fils-Aimé really did that much at Nintendo of America, because I don't think Nintendo of America is allowed to do that much anyways. He is a good figurehead, he's nice and tall, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Japanese people hired him mostly just because he was tall and a good presenter, certainly, but when it came down to day-to-day businesses, whether a Mario game was going to be made or not, all of that is happening in Nintendo of Japan. Like, Nintendo of America, best case scenario is a translator for the Western audience, and even in that best case scenario, there have been instances of them translating games and then like mistranslating them or translating them differently in a form of censorship or just crazy SJW logic
Too slow.
or propaganda. But yeah, as far as Nintendo of America specifically, I don't think they work on any games. If you told me that they had made Club 51 or something like that, some small mini game, some e-store mini game that they were actually allowed to make anything at all, I would be incredibly shocked. There is also on that same similar thought a real question as far as how many people and who actually makes video games in Nintendo of Japan. Like, how much is Shigeru Miyamoto really involved? We know in the old days that there were, or at least it's claimed and assumed to be true, that in the old days games were made by small groups of 3 or 4 people. But I don't know if there ever was any major hiring of new people to scale up, or if it is just the exact same old people still programming in small groups. That would seem unbelievable if that was the actual claim, is that there were 5 people that made something like Mario Odyssey, but maybe there were 5 people at Nintendo that made Mario Odyssey, and then third-party companies that did the vast majority of the development. And some of this is definitely not speculation. We know for a fact that Nintendo hasn't really put their fingers into any code of the Metroid series for a long time. Rare was making the Donkey Kong Country games. So yeah, there's a lot to be said there. If anything, I think Reggie Fils-Aime's book and story would be more interesting if you talk about him running, I believe it was Domino's or Little Caesars, one of the pizza companies he was in charge of. And him writing a book now is effectively him admitting that he's approaching retirement at a fairly young age because he's peaked, and that there has been really no talk about his current job, which very possibly just secretly has not worked out at all.
Are you ready for true?
Do I want to attack this guy?
March
I think
on!
we might as well do it.
I'm over here! Pathetic!
Maybe this time I can fade completely.
Moving on, Video Games Chronicle has an article here. Ratchet developer reveals PS5's activity estimates are based on real player data, which I don't know if that really is news. One would have assumed that any activity estimates, which are a thing that PlayStation announced a long time ago and really has not talked enough about, it probably deserves more highlighting.
Rydo and Steed, advance as one.
Okay. Suppose we evolve
One
here,
step closer to victory.
Relinquish control and watch.
and we'll see what happens.
Take me.
Here's that story from Video Games Chronicle. The Steam Deck owners might be able to upgrade the SSD even on the cheapest model. Seems like somebody has some version of the Steam Deck in their hand, although this very well may not be a final version. But yeah, this is an interesting case. I wonder if the reason why there is a case like this, however, is because the screen is fairly prone to being destroyed and scratched, and that very well make an argument to get the top tier etched glass version of the Steam model. Steam Deck. Let's go and hit this. Hit this. Go and play this.
Like a beacon of hope.
But then the subtitle here is end user replacement is not recommended. I wouldn't be surprised if it is standard, like somewhat standard M2 memory that is then directly surface mounted onto the motherboard. But they say it's socketed 2230 M2 modules, which might mean that it's also a nightmare to get to them. You could have to remove considerable amounts of cords and cables just to open the whole thing up. It'll be interesting to see iFixit's coverage on this. So look at this, what I assume is a digital render where you have the white background there and speakers and buttons. I also am not 100% sure this is a touchscreen. But then you look at this version and everything looks a little duller, and this is black. So it'll be interesting to see which version is the version that actually ships, whether it's this closer to the white connect pieces or the black pieces. White would immediately show dirt, which might be a good thing. I think it would be fairly lacking if it didn't have a touchscreen functionality, but honestly, it just constantly gets into that same issue where nothing that it can offer possibly will quite satisfy for the price point. And there really is just a reality check that everybody, including myself, is going to have to happen and think about, is that when I get a cell phone, I'm paying $800-900, and sometimes that is through monthly payments. And so if Valve was willing to take monthly payments of $50 for a Steam Deck and then expect you to replace the Steam Deck every couple of years and embrace that cell phone mentality and that e-waste mentality, there might be a better path towards upgrading that way. But if you think about the mid-90s boom of computer cells, that was kind of the idea that they thought everybody would get a computer and everybody would upgrade the computer fairly often, every 3 or 4 years, or they had hoped for that, and didn't really happen. Lots of people didn't get computers. Lots of people got computers and kept them for 10-12 years. Cell phones started off incredibly bad, and the upgrade in processing power and screen size and resolution and all of that are very tangible, noticeable differences. But even now, most arguments for getting a new cell phone are gone. Like, getting a Samsung S20 versus an S21 is a moderate change, and they've been pushing like 5G technology and 4G and 3G as ways to trick people into buying cell phones when they really didn't need them. But even that, I think, is going to fairly be seen through by most people. It'll be very interesting to see iFixit tear down a Steam Deck when they get their hands on one to see what the repairability is on that. I think we're almost assured that we will have Game Newell come out and say we need to do better after that initial iFixit tear down.
Are you worth your weight in gold?
I would totally get rid of the headphone jack if you told me I could slot a M2 stick into a slot on the top of the device. There isn't really a way to do that, but there could be a way to do that, certainly. And I could even see some people being willing to have a longer SD memory stick instead of the short ones in their device, just sticking out the top of it, or potentially put more battery in that same spot, and maybe it could be a trade-off. Like, this is a 3-4, so if I play this, I should kill this.
I suppose I've lost some of my edge.
Moving on, according to Video Games Chronicle, it looks like the Xbox Gears of War studio is working on something new. Level design lists an original IP project. I think we kind of had already heard that the Coalition studio was wanting to do something new. I don't think Gears as a series needs to die or anything, but I also don't think we're quite at a point where it needs the Coalition to continue to work on it forever. Although that may very well come to a point and to a head where we start to see Microsoft studios that they've acquired being told to work on things like Gears of War when they've never worked on them before in their life. And that might work for some teams, but it wouldn't make a lot of sense to put Double Fine in charge of Gears of War. It might make sense to take the Elder Scrolls in Space concept and put that instead in the Gears of War universe, and just abandon the Elder Scrolls in Space idea. Okay, so we hold on to this one, and this one. I'll kill that. And then we evolve here.
I'm ready for more. What do we
And
have
kill
here?
that.
Loyalty is ironclad.
You can end the turn there.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Previously they had made this Alpha Point demo trying out Unreal Engine 5, which definitely highlights that
Enemy or no, you did good.
Microsoft is not afraid of using the Unreal Engine, where honestly I wouldn't be surprised if Microsoft also would look to making its own engine that is a direct competitor to the Unreal Engine. It would make a lot of sense for Steam potentially to have its own engine that competes against Unreal. It would make sense if Microsoft had its own engine. But that is certainly what like EA has tried to do and Crysis has tried to do, and there hasn't been major successes along those lines. So we went to level 110 in Swordcraft, which gives us 400 rupees. Nice. So we'll just play multiplayer now since we've done that arena run. Didn't get but one victory, which, yeah, that's pretty much to be expected. There's a quote here that says, we We don't have any direction or mandate that says every game has to be an ongoing, sustainable game. Take Psychonauts. There might be a Psychonauts 3, but I'm not going to tell designer Tim Schafer to go make it. Knowing the history of games that he makes, I don't think he's going to be making a game that has season and goes on for 5 years. Seasons and goes on for 5 years. Which, yeah, that is very similar to what I just said, as far as it would be very, very weird to have Psychonauts developer Double Fine work on the next Gears of War project. That being said, there is also kind of an overlap there that I would highlight. There is a very believable scenario where Tim Schafer is sidelined at Double Fine and the team at Double Fine is allowed to do things differently or asked or told to do things differently. Tim Schafer pretty much is the manager of the company, and he's not particularly known for being great at that. If he was great at that, we would already have Psychonauts 3, and we would have had several more games from Double Fine. And more than likely, Double Fine wouldn't have been acquired in the first place. Like, Tim Schafer honestly is better off as being treated as a visionary director, a Kojima-style creator, which this is also my concern with, like, Kojima Productions, is that there really needs to be some office managers and people in charge just to do the accounting and do the paperwork. Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Skate Wars developer will share a little something on Monday, but they say not to expect a game reveal during EA Play Live next week. And that it's a white screen of text that they tweeted out. You know, it's a little shocking to see EA get back into the business and of making video games, and it's kind of a sad thing from some people's perspective, certainly, because a lot of people would have been much more happier to see EA just go out of business and be shut down and being acquired by a different company, to see all the managers and the money grubbers in charge of EA go away. The fact that EA has been able to survive this long speaks poorly for what the future of Activision Blizzard will probably be, because I imagine Activision Blizzard will soon boil down to just a very similar type of employees that as EA has, money grubbers, and not very many of the original creators or very many good game developers. But I suppose as long as you can just keep on making money, you can live as a corporation. Which I've often thought that there should be some level of offenses of any kind of sort that demand a corporate execution. Certainly it would make sense, and I think most people could say that if you're an oil company and you're spilling massive amounts of oil and damaging the entire planet and threatening the lives of the entire planet, that probably at that point demands corporate execution, just full on liquidation. This business cannot be in charge. The people in charge of this business cannot sit on the boards of other companies, because this cannot go unpunished as a concept. But for a company like EA, even that argument that EA deserves to be on the chopping block and executed as a company, that's a harder argument to make, because you would have to make an argument that there was just gross unethical behavior at EA with their microtransactions, that they specifically allowed and targeted people underage to or people addicted to spending microtransactions to spend well beyond their means. At a certain point, I certainly could see agreeing to the idea of just gross greed at a certain point. Just like, you are so unethically greedy, you tried to make such a ridiculous amount of profit that your company should be broken up and or executed. America definitely has anti-monopoly laws, and other countries have anti-monopoly laws. It's just that corruption is the way of doing business pretty much in America, as most capitalist countries, so monopolies don't get broken up anywhere as much as they should be broken up. And I think EA definitely is a candidate for a company that was a monopoly and was able to acquire companies they probably should have never been allowed to acquire, and were able to hold on to properties and do nothing with them. A lot of this concept, particularly for video games, could also be fixed if you just had better definitions of abandonware, and if there was a certain argument that could be made to say, well, Dead Space 3 has not gotten an update in 4 years, and even though they're still selling it, they're not updating it or making a continuation in the series, therefore Dead Space 3 should be public domain. And at a certain point, maybe abandonware isn't even the only pressure you would need on that. Maybe it's just Dead Space 1 came out 10 years ago. For digital games, 10 years is all you get, and then everything becomes public domain. It really is ridiculous to have 70 years plus after the death of the original creator to ensure that nobody alive today could ever possibly benefit from anything created in their lifetime, or even many decades before their lifetime, being in the public domain. But I certainly could get a rant in around that, but there's kind of no point to do that. I'm trying to rush here and not get bogged down in ranting. Video Games Chronicle has an article. Metroid Prime Trilogy for the Switch is, quote, done and Nintendo is holding it, claims a journalist. QA resources and potential marketing plans are holding off the remaster release. Also, wouldn't be surprised if the marketing plans particularly are around the release of the new Metroid game, and the fact that Metroid Prime 4 is clearly delayed or in development hell or cancelled. There is also a thought that Ubisoft's game Beyond Good and Evil 2 was never really a game. I mean, I think we can pretty much all assume that that's the case, is that it never was really a game, and they were making these hugely ambitious visual teasers for the game, but they were not really showing any gameplay mechanics, and what they were showing really didn't even feel like Beyond Good and Evil 1.
Activate, enhance, fire.
And I imagine if Ubisoft were to break up into smaller companies and somebody else was to get the rights to Beyond Good and Evil 2 and Beyond Good and Evil, I imagine they would pretty much want to just start over from scratch, and it would just be a Duke Nukem Forever scenario. The one thing nobody seemed to learn their lesson from, as far as Duke Nukem Forever, is just to put out a game win you as quickly as possible, even if it's not that good. That is one of the things that's kind of shocking about Dead Space 3. As much as people ranted and railed against all the microtransactions, and sure they're there, maybe standards have just been lowered more nowadays. It's really not that annoying. That there is still an action experience there, at least in the version I'm playing now in 2021. I'm rolling in tungsten, which is the premium currency to craft things. I've gotten my gun to do massive amounts of damage and have the maximum amount of bullets in a clip, and there's just a whole lot of mediocre, is what I would call it, mediocre Dead Space gameplay. But it's not awful Dead Space gameplay. Had they not been forced by EA to put in all the microtransaction type things, it's not really even microtransaction, it's just DLC. And had the entire trilogy of Dead Space just not had the DLC garbage in it, it would have been a better series, certainly. So that's something we'll be looking for in the reboot, is if there's major announcements for DLC that are skins or suits or weapons or scavenger bots. But had none of that been in any of the games in the series, it would have been a better series, certainly. And there definitely are some points where it is very obvious that Dead Space 3 is a step back and worse than Dead Space 1. But I can't immediately just claim it is completely awful and not worth playing. I would at this point say it probably is worth a quick run through playing on normal or easy. Honestly, I've not died a lot on normal, but playing on easy may have been a little bit better. I've managed to make one gun that uses a lot of bullets and shoots really fast, and I've managed to stick with our main gun that shoots relatively fast, but not super fast, and does a maximum amount of damage. And I mostly, I'd say for 86% of the game, use the default first gun, and every now and then you'll run into a scenario where it's fairly obvious a lot of people are going to attack you, and then that's when I switch over to a faster, like, submachine gun. But there's a whole gun crafting system in the game, and it doesn't deserve to exist. It's pointless. And the scavenger bots concept is pointless, and a lot of it is just kind of stupid and shouldn't be there. The horror elements are practically non-existent. The story is incredibly dull, but it's not that bad. I definitely am having a lot more of a video game experience playing Dead Space 3 than I am playing Hellblade than I had playing Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice. Alright, moving on. Video Game Chronicle has an article. Tencent is going to buy the Sackboy developer Sumo Digital in a $1.27 billion deal. This is a UK-based developer. It will likely continue to be a work for high business for companies such as Sony. So, yeah. I feel like Sumo Digital has made other games other than Sackboy. And so I think it is, they're calling it Sumo Group. That was Sumo Digital. Let's see if we can get a list of games. If you just type in sumo, you get pictures of sumo wrestlers. Alright. We do this.
More fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
We do this. We keep 1, 2, and 3.
That's enough for me.
My loyalty is ironclad.
Evolve 1
March
here.
on! Harder armor! Stronger armor!
With that one.
Steel yourself!
Move!
Steel
That
yourself!
one.
That's
My
enough for
loyalty
me.
is
So
ironclad.
apparently I have 177 jobs. So let's see. Hood, Outlaws, and Legends. Hotshot Racing. Sackboy: A Big Adventure. World WST Snoker. Snoker, I'm not sure what that stands for. Little Orpheus. Never heard of it. Spider. Like a lot of these are really big images. Team Sonic Racing. Crackdown 3. Let's see. Hitman 2. They worked on. I assume they didn't do all of it. For Forza Horizon 4. Forza Motorsport 7. They made the game Snake Pass, which I guess I'm kind of glad they didn't make a Snake Pass 2 because that game did not control well. Hitman 5, Episode 5, Colorado.
My armor has been pierced! All of you.
They worked on Disney Infinity 3.0. Forza Horizon 2 presents Fast and Furious. Scorched. Little Big Planet 3. Forza Horizon 2. Mushy Monsters, Katsuma Unleashed. Xbox Fitness. Nike Plus Connect Training, Little Big Planet 2 Cross Controller Pack. They're listing everything here. Sonic and All-Stars Racing's Transformed. Let's go ahead and do this.
Who will be my victim today?
Do I want to do anything more?
Are you worth your weight in gold?
Let's see. F1 2021, Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing. What I'm really noticing here is a lot of these are licensed projects. Doctor Who, the Adventure Games, which, yeah. These are the old Doctors, so. They worked on Dead Space Ignition, which I think this was either a mobile game or like you can't really click on it to get any more information. There's seem to be no hyperlinks. It's an action puzzle game. I think it was on the Wii only. They made Hasbro Family Game Night 3 or worked on it, which they should be making more of those or re-releasing those. Split Second Velocity, another racing game. Disney's A Christmas Carol. GTI Club plus Rally Coute d'Azur. Let's see. Sega Superstars Tennis. New International Track and Field. Let's see. Driver 76. This is a lot of games for the number of years. Super Rub-a-Dub. Virtua Tennis 3. And Broken Sword 4. The Angel of Death. And Go Sudoku. Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. Race Driver 2006. Toka Racing Driver 2. Virtua Tennis World Tour. England International Football.
This town eats good folk for breakfast. This town eats good folk for breakfast.
Okay,
Hands up!
let's
Hands
go ahead
up!
and hit that.
Crusty horseshoe.
Darn it. Let's see. What game is this? Outrun 2. Outrun 2 SP. Alright, so that apparently was the last of their list of games. That's a really bad website and a very weird way to list all your games. But nothing there strikes me as being particularly Chinese-centric for Tencent as a company. Now, arguably Tencent maybe doesn't want to be a Chinese company. That's totally believable. But I don't know how you potentially stop being a Chinese company. Like, I don't think there really is a way to do that. Like, I think you get shot if you even try. Like, I imagine there are severe limitations and assets would be frozen if, say, the CEOs or the managers of a Chinese company tried to move to England and I guess claim asylum or something like that. Much like how most of the rich people in Cuba had all of their property taken when they fled to America.
One step closer to victory.
All the magic is that how you treat a lady?
But yeah.
Damage heavy.
That's a weird mix mash of games, and if they lost a lot of projects, if they stopped working with Sega, for instance, or if they stopped working with Sony, I'm not sure Sumo really has a lot of its own IPs to help sustain it, but it may have the talent where it doesn't matter. And it really is just a case of the continued acquisition war between large corporations that I think will go on for a while still. And I don't think we're gonna anytime soon wake up one day and stop having people acquire things. If anything, it's a little funny that Sony hasn't tried to directly acquire other companies. There you go. I don't know if this really is news, but apparently there's an analysis that the Call of Duty Warzone developer has grown by nearly 50% in a year. Raven has hired over 100 people in the past 12 months as it transitions into a standalone super studio. Okay. Like, that might mean something, but also I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of video game companies could scale up while developing a game by hire a lot of QA people, hire a lot of temp workers and low-level workers, and then as soon as the game gets ready for release and released, they end up laying off all the QA people and a lot of the low-level workers. So hiring alone does not guarantee good long-term success of a company. Amazon.com, I think, is probably a great example of a company that has been forced by circumstances to hire a lot of people, but the second they can figure out how to not hire those people and fire them, they would definitely do that. Amazon would be more than happy to have automatic bots run every part of their business with just a few people at the top making all the profit. I think we had already talked about this, but Gametsu says Video Game 6 Extraction has been delayed to January 2022. Doesn't look particularly different from Dead Space as a game or any zombie shooter, really. According to Gametsu, a game called Song of Iron launches August 31st. I feel like we'd already talked about this one too, so we'll just jump through this. A smartphone game called Finding Paradise is coming to iOS and Android. It's the sequel to the Moon and a Bird Story, which definitely there's a lot of people that have put a lot of praise on that game, To the Moon and the Bird Story, but it always just kind of looked like an RPG Maker game to me, and this also just looks like an RPG Maker, so this might very well just be a case in which this guy is really good with his contacts and getting people to write stories about his games, his RPG Maker games, whereas the vast majority of other RPG Maker developers don't bother to even announce their game or even try to get contacts. It really wouldn't take me more than a few days to just get the top list of video game companies' contacts and have a professional like press announcement written out to email to them, and maybe that would get some coverage, or maybe it wouldn't, but I don't think a lot of companies even bother to do that much. You could certainly time it where if it was a slow Monday and you put out a press pass at like 6 a.m. Eastern time, where people just getting into work see this email and don't have anything else scheduled for the day, then they would potentially write an article about it.
When will this cruelty end?
But by the time you hit Tuesday or late Monday, that's usually when the big announcements happen and you've lost your audience. Or if you put it out on a late Thursday, early Friday, there tends not to be that many announcements on those times either.
Should have been quicker.
Okay. If I do this, I can do 1 damage here. And then I can do 1 damage here. Let's see. Gamatsu says a new Tom Clancy game is going to be announced on July 19th. There's a 25-second first look. Is this what Tom Clancy games really were? Like, that's the weirdness certainly to take from this, is that the Tom Clancy universe has been stretched and twisted to mean something completely different nowadays. That it's definitely not a Rainbow Six Siege. No, that's not the one. It's not a Splinter Cell type game. So that's what I have always thought the Tom Clancy series was really best known for, was the Splinter Cell versions, and then there was an occasional Tom Clancy game that was more of a multiplayer action first-person shooter game, but they at their core were the Splinter Cell stealth games, competing against things like Metal Gear Solid. If that's not, and that probably isn't, what Tom Clancy games are now, I'm not 100% sure what they are.
March on! A second wind blow. Got to roam in style.
I'm also not really sure I'm super interested in Tom Clancy games. Gamatsu has this week's Japanese game releases: Utararo Mono Zan 2, Sweet Clown Gozen Sanji no Okashi na Doikishi for the Switch. Which, that's a long title, certainly. I thought Utararo Mono was a long name. Let's see. Decent number of games here. Not a lot of them I'm recognizing, certainly, but decent number of games. Plus various visual novels. Seems like Japan might be speeding up their releases again. Maybe they're back to business a little bit more.
Are you ready for
pointless path.
Let's hit that.
Another pointless path.
Hit that. Go ahead and play one of those. Let's see. Gamatsu has my next life as a villainess. All routes lead to doom. Pirates That Store the Waters launches December 23rd. This is based off of a fairly recent anime.
When will this cruelty end?
Although this feels like it also is a bit of a spin-off and kind of a visual novel experience. Yeah, it's an otome visual novel, which probably isn't the kind of game that deserves that would get coverage, whether it deserves it or not. I probably shouldn't say that, but
A challenge!
a lot of these anime-based visual novels and anime-based games have failed to really be that interesting.
Who will be my victim today?
Okay.
One
And
step
evolve this
closer
guy to be a
victory.
little bit
Armor
more
fights
deadly.
more. We won't
Play
give 'em
these
an
guys
inch.
as
Worth your weight
defense
in gold.
I like. Give me that.
and attack. Gamatsu has the
I'm a
Ultra
prisoner of
Mono
this
Zan 2
world's
4th
whims.
trailer, Birth of the Clan Chief, which I suppose we could see if it's not played in full screen.
My hands are clean.
Yep, it looks like a hack and slash action RPG game. Doesn't look terrible.
Blood on.
Yep.
Time to retreat.
Well, I guess the real question would come down to, though, is there a way to play Ultra Ramono Zan 1? And are there previous games in the series that aren't part of the Zan sub-series that need to be played? And inherently that's an issue that comes about with any of these games, is that they're questionable
Are you
as
ready
far
for
as their
Another pointless path.
pathetic?
Okay. Do I have any way of killing this?
Pathetic.
No.
Who will be my victim
I can
today?
do this. I can evolve
This
this.
is our last push.
Time to appraise your. Are you worth your weight
And
in
if
gold?
this guy can do even 2 damage to me, probably can by just evolving it, I lose. Unless he just doesn't have evolution points.
Through moments both fleeting and eternal. We shall. Through moments both fleeting and eternal.
Maybe he doesn't have a card here. Nope. He was able to get it to 13, and he was able to give this one Storm. And give that one Storm.
Enemy or no, you did good.
Now I need ranked wins right now, so the only thing I could really do is get away from this swordcraft, which probably needs some work, to this swordcraft, which probably needs a ton of work. Yeah, and I just never have time really to try and go and build a meta deck or look at the tournament winning decks that are listed and find something that would win a little bit better. Yeah.
To arms. There's a
My
battle
commitment
underway.
to trying to get meta
Prove
decks
that I'm stronger than
only went as far as having something like Hearthstone Deck Tracker or websites that let you copy and paste decks as an option in Hearthstone. When it really got down to having to build them manually by myself, that was too much work. And even the websites that would help you with Hearthstone Deck Tracker, I don't think really could help you as much as or as easily as it should. Like, it could tell you what you could build with the cards in your deck, but when it was telling you what you could build with the cards in your deck, Hearthstone Deck Tracker was also then limiting itself to not say, well, you could use this amount of dust to craft more cards to have a better deck, or you could sell some cards to get more dust. And at the core of it, that is, I guess, what collectible card games often boil down to on the advanced level, is that they are a lot of talk and a lot of deck building theory around trying to get better decks made. Whereas I think I'd probably be fairly happy if every expansion on a digital card game gave you pre-built decks and you couldn't mix or change cards, and you just had perhaps 50 to 100 different decks to pick from, and you were playing against people with one of those other 50 to 100 decks. Alright, can this one attack twice? Yes, that's the card we want to power up. We want to do that on the 9th turn, which we'd like to put that on the field.
This is our way out.
Moving on with the news, Gematsu says Gmode Archives plus Ketsuo Kinzuna Jigoku Taichi DX has been announced for the Switch. I think we had already heard about this. It looks like it's a shoot 'em up game. Or at least one of them looks like a shoot 'em up game. I'm not sure this other one on the side is a shoot 'em up game. Assuming that is 2 games. That may very well be just 1 game. Yep. It's a port of the featured phone version. I think all the Gmode games are phone games. Type Moon Times Volume 4 information program happened at 10 today. So, has that really happened? Yes, it has. Type Moon is like a visual novel, I think. See a lot of people presenting. Here we can see they are being separated by glass in this presentation. I think we probably have hit a point where people want to see the glass or the plastic separating people if they are going to sit at the same table. They don't want people to edit out that or make it seem like it's normal. Certainly a lot of the TV shows the minimal TV shows I'm actually watching have played up a lot that they are being particularly cautious. Although often it seems like they really aren't with the pandemic. And certainly worldwide and the United States at this point, the pandemic is as bad, if not worse, than it's ever been, with the Delta variant now taking over in America. Sorry, I'm pouring myself some more water to drink. I'm still watching this game, Type Moon, and it's a fighting game. Interesting. I thought it was a visual novel, but nope. Apparently it's a fighting game. Or at least they have a fighting game that they're releasing. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here that's all Asian characters. Looks like a cell phone Chinese visual novel, if I was to guess. Maybe a little bit of a turn-based strategy RPG 2, 59 cents, Chinese only. Can't really put that on the follow list. Here we have a game called Escape from Nowhere, which is just an asset flip garbage game for $5.99. Here we have a game called Ravenland, which is some card-based like deck building game that's already mixed. Let's see, $7.49, single player, English only. I kind of would like to see some more reviews on this, but yeah, I think I'll put it on the follow list just to see some more reviews. I think this will probably in 6 months have a lot, either stay at mixed or have a lot of negative reviews that will further explain why it is mixed reviewed. Okay.
No one
Let's
gets
go and
past
hit
me.
that. Let's go and hit
Is it
this.
edible? Only one way to find out. This calls for a taste test.
Go ahead and
Oh,
hit that.
so it's a fight you want.
And
This is
hit
our way
that.
out.
See, next we have a game on Steam called Pog 4, which does not seem to have anything to do with the old milk cap game Pogs. Seems to just be a low effort, minimal puzzle game for $1.99, allegedly full audio in a bunch of languages.
I'll do my best.
Never did really come back and try to reboot my computer. I'm still dealing with Dead Space being paused, and so I haven't rebooted my computer. I definitely need to make some changes to the BIOS. Apparently my hard drive thinks it's removable when it really shouldn't be marked as removable. And the Windows 7 backups are not willing to let you make a system image of your C drive on a removable D drive, which doesn't really make sense. Seriously?
Oh, so it's a fight you want. Whoa. So there never was a mystery?
Oh,
What do we have here?
that sucks. Next we have a game on Steam here called The Adventures of Herbie and Cat LeChat, which just looks like an MS Paint level graphics point and click game, just not polished enough to interest me. They're comparing it to Broken Sword, which, yeah, that's a big difference in graphics. English, allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Two Room, which looks like it's a top-down hack and slash adventure game. Doesn't look terrible. I'm not sure that there's really a game here I want to play.
Best of luck
It's
to you.
labeled as a roguelike game. $8.39, English, Portuguese, Brazil. I'll give it a chance. We do see 87% positivity so far. Right. Do this. And do
My
this.
allies, my
Lovely
friends.
day for a fight.
And go ahead and evolve this.
March on.
Keep your comrades close. Nothing scary with
Attack
allies
that.
by your side.
No escape.
And then attack that. Okay.
Let's play.
Here we have a game on Steam called 100 Hidden Cats 2, which, yeah, I guess we'd have to go back and check and see if these 100 object games are well reviewed or not. I don't think I want to support this company at this point. They just made far too many games. You can see it's very positive, so it is what people are offering. But also you can see that this game is just not something I have put on the wish list because it's too boring of a concept for people that just want to find hidden cats throughout an environment as a Where's Waldo game. I'd want a little bit more color in the system. I'd want a little bit more visual improvement.
One step closer to victory.
Past is my only. You're weak.
Impossible.
You're weak.
You're a sharper shot than I thought.
There we go. Let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Project Aria Crucible.
General, we destroyed
Which-
them.
Looks like a kind of ugly shoot 'em up game where you're shooting as either a ship or a fairy that is fighting other kinds of magical creatures. $4.99, English full audio. Here we have a game called WOMG Light version, which they're calling a Metroidvania plus coding plus Breath of the Wild. Or bots. I don't even know what bots is supposed to stand for. Seems like there's a lot going on here. I like this art of this character, but the way she's drawn here is fairly generic. It seems like this whole screen has a crosshair that is just always on display. At least in the trailer it's always on display. But it's not in any of the screenshots, which is weird. It says free to play. Here they say it requires a third-party account system, but they say here you can choose the guest option. Your progress will be saved and you'll have access to the Steam game wherever you want. The option to create an account with us will allow you to access the Steam game from any mobile device. It's important to remember that this is for you. That for this you must have internet access. This is English and Spanish Latin America. Science fiction Metroidvania game, handmade graphics and original music that will take your breath away. Is there a non-light version of this? No. So it seems like what they've done is they've taken a mobile game and ported it to a cell phone. Taken a cell phone game and ported it to Steam. And it doesn't look terrible, so I'm going to put this on the follow list. I've been waiting to see a scenario where we start to run into more of this, where we start to see decent cell phone games saying, hey, we can actually compete on Steam. Let's put our game on Steam, even if it's not going to be great. Definitely for WMG, the game looks like it's in widescreen. It doesn't look like a cell phone game. It doesn't look low effort. It doesn't look like it's laden with microtransactions. It doesn't look incredibly limited or small.
To arms! There's a battle underway!
And part of seeing good cell phone games ported to Steam is also a desire to just see good cell phone games in general. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Furious Seas, which looks like it's a VR pirate ship simulator game. Seems like you mostly steer the ship and ring bells, so you may not very well actually control any of the cannons or anything like that. It's $13.99, requires VR, English full audio. I guess you do control the guns, but yeah, it doesn't seem like you really control too much or do too much. I'm gonna put this on the follow list. At the very least, it's a slightly different experience with VR, whereas so many VR games tend to just be like archery simulators. Here we have a game called Code 608, which looks like it's a Chinese RPG, would be my guess. Best way to describe it. Yeah. Looks a little RPG maker-ish, but I wouldn't be surprised if it actually doesn't use that. $2.39. English, Japanese, and simplified Chinese. Here we have Danganronpa. Danganronpa. Someone asked me if I was going to cover the second game and whether it was going to be a blind playthrough. I think almost certainly it will be a blind playthrough. I don't think I would be stupid enough to make the same mistake twice in this instance. And watch, say, Game Grumps play Danganronpa 2. Let's see. So it probably would be a blind playthrough. I'm suspecting 6 months to a year would be the time I would get around to it. Right now we can see that, well, I could get like a 25% off of the bundle if I spent $44.99. If I was just to buy the main game, I would be paying $19.99, or I can get 10% off of the one, 2 bundles, and get pay $17.99. Also, I need to, I think, put this on the wish list too. It is on the wish list. Interesting that it's not easily noticeable as being on the wish list. This one, the Ultra Despair Girls, I think you probably would want to play after playing the second game. Yeah. So, play Danganronpa 2, and then play Ultra Despair Girls, then play version 3, which I assume is the main thing to play. Yeah, I'm looking at the trailer right now. It doesn't look to me like any of the characters from the first game are coming back.
Lovely day for a fight.
Well, they're not being introduced, at least in this trailer. They may very well be coming back. But it does definitely look like a significant number of new characters are being introduced. Part of the problem is if you don't introduce new characters in every sequel to Danganronpa, then you create this weird scenario where you know the old characters well enough to not suspect them.
Thy little canary.
Yeah, when you look at this collection of people, it doesn't look like any of those are the old people. And looking at this collection of people on this image, it doesn't look like any of these are the same people. A lot of them are the exact same archetypes, at least in body image. But you also have some new characters. New body types, I would say. Do we want to do that, or do we want to just wait? I think we do this.
Come get some.
Nothing scary with allies by your side. Too slow.
So yeah, not to put any hard pressure on anybody, but if you do want to see me play Danganronpa 2, I suppose the best way to get me to play any game is to friend me on Steam and gift me the game. Because, yeah, it's going to be a hard decision, certainly, to spend $20 for yet another visual novel. I still need to finish the Nonary third game in the series, which is the Zero Escape. Well, what? This is confusing. The Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma game. And I have that one, so I'll cover that next. But also, then you have the Summoner Somnium files in this bundle, which I don't feel like the Somnium files actually connects at all to Zero Escape as a series. I think it's just the Zero Escape Team Zero Escape bundle. Like, yeah, this game I do not think is part of this. And yeah, playing Danganronpa games didn't really result in any content ID claims or anything, I don't think. So there is room to go back and play more of the Spike Chunsoft series of games.
So that's how you use it. So that's how you use
Come
it.
get some.
Nothing scary with allies by your side.
Let's see, I probably should have killed something there. But whatever. Yeah. So, if I could pull off what I've been able to pull off with the Nonary games and the Danganronpa games with the Atlas games, and could actually play an Atlas game without being really afraid of content ID or DMCA claims, I would be happy to play some of the Atlas games. Although, also, some of the Atlas games on Steam are still in a bit of a weird position where you don't have the first Persona game to play. So it'd be a little weird to start with like Persona 4 or Persona 5.
I need more fear, more terror.
Okay. We'll hold on to this one. And then this one. And then this one.
Eyes close as the curtain falls. Die,
And then we'll
Cretan.
hit that one.
Eyes close as the curtain
So
falls.
that's
that
how you
one.
use it.
Such a good guinea pig.
Shutting down.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Fat Fritz 2.0 SE, which looks like some kind of just chess game of no real interest. I guess this is a high-level chess AI, but I don't know why you'd specifically want a high-level chess AI that would probably beat you every time. $79.99 definitely feels like way too much to ask for a game that looks this generic. I would think that any AI that has like almost a guaranteed chance of beating you at chess should be just like a tech demo that you could play online. It shouldn't be something that people would actually want to spend money on. Okay, is there any way to do this?
Sow the seeds of war, reap the profit.
March
I
on.
think this might be the best way to pull this off.
Fear leads to strife.
Do that.
Strife becomes
Let's
gunfire.
speed things up.
And
Is it edible? Only one way to find out.
This is jolly good fun.
Did I do okay?
Too slow.
let's see. Next, we have a game on Steam called Gang of Paws, which seems to just be a position placement game. Seems to play off of deck building and cards also. I just don't think there's enough game here. This interface seems just a little too simplistic. $17.99 English full audio. I've heard people claim that you should play just the original, like, rebirth of Binding of Isaac to start, and not start with Repentance, the DLC, which at a certain level that probably is the case, but that's a hard pill to swallow, certainly. If I was to get back into covering Binding of Isaac, I would definitely want to play something like I would definitely want to play Repentance Plus, or Repentance. There's no Repentance Plus so far, and I suspect there won't be a Repentance Plus. Yeah. Here we have a game on Steam called 3 O'Clock Horror, which, yeah, I don't think the graphics are good enough for a horror game. Psychological horror, Lovecraftian, as it says. It's free, so I guess the price is right. English only. Is this a student project? Not by any indication I can find. Gamma Sutra has an article. A French union has filed a complaint against Ubisoft for creating a system of harassment. At this point, though, this may very well just be not news. Like, clearly the unions, the same unions, I think, are very unhappy with Ubisoft, and yet Ubisoft constantly, so far, has not failed any court case, and gets vindicated, for lack of a better term.
Thunder roars like a beast from the void.
So the unions seem like they are just going to constantly try and file complaints until they win, which at a certain level that is exactly what unions are for and would do. It's just to keep fighting the fight over and over again. But at some point, as an outsider, I need to see some level of guilt actually happen to Ubisoft. And at a certain point, you have to just question, is this just French people being French and being pains in the butt, or part of a bigger general decline in the economy of France?
I shall give birth to a new world.
Like, that may be the case too. Can we do something here?
I need more beer, more terror.
Got a job to do.
Hold on to that one, and that one.
My loyalty is ironclad.
Okay.
Die, cretin.
If I kill this, then this one, I can't attack with this. Which is probably for the better anyways. So kill that one. And take a 50-50 shot. Or do 4 damage.
My loyalty is ironclad.
I mean, from skimming this, it just is the same old, an institutional sexual harassment claim. That this doesn't seem to be any new accusations at all. It just seems to be the same old, and the story, unless the story progresses, it just shouldn't be reported on. The Vic Mignogna case is kind of a similar type of story, where it was something interesting to report on when the lawsuits first happened, when the depositions first happened, when the initial court case first happened, and when the appeals first happened. But the appeals have since been waiting to be heard for about 1.5 years now, and so there's really no reason to talk about it. And that's definitely a reason why I haven't talked about it. Also, the Vic Mignogna case doesn't really have anything to do with video games. Whereas we know Gamasutra is sort of run by SJWs. They're not as terrible as a lot of other video game news sites, and they've been pushing these stories and reporting on every slight movement and filing against Ubisoft. And I imagine the only thing I've really been able to suspect is going to happen is I think these lawsuits or complaints are going to go nowhere once again. But we've already seen that the son of the CEO has taken some talent and formed his own company. I think we're going to start seeing the good employees that actually want to work at Ubisoft moved over to this new company, and we might see even some financial shenanigans in which a lot of assets get handed over to this new company. Meanwhile, the union members, which I think may still just be the IT department that was refusing to do their jobs, at least that's what I took from it, and got fired. Like, those people probably aren't going to the new company.
Strength and beauty together.
And I wouldn't be surprised if a significant number of other people don't make it to the new company also. And a lot of that may also be cleaning house in the other direction. I could see the CEO's son taking the good employees and leaving the immature employees who put up the images in question. The let's crop a head off of a character and put him on a porn star's body joke images. But yeah, it's really not news unless there was an actual until there's actually a judgment, and that's kind of it. I mean, you could probably say filing another charge would have been news if it was the first time, but at this point, it's redundant. It is interesting that this complaint is being filed with the Bob Bigany Criminal Court. So it's a criminal claim in French law, whereas in the United States it would probably be a civil claim at best. Let's see. Moving on, Gamatsu also has the article, Tencent to acquire Sumo Group. Sumo Group is made up of the following studios: Animal Hawk, Canada and UK, haven't heard of it, Pipeworks Studio, which is Timbra Games. I think I've heard of this because I think I'm playing a game right now from Timbra Games, or I did. What's interesting here is, isn't the Chinese Room that game that got all the backlash from China? So is this literally an instance where Tencent is buying the company that owns the Chinese Room to potentially shut them down? We'll have to do some research there. It could be a different company that I'm thinking of, though.
Could manage this.
Lab 42, otherwise Pixel Ants, Red Kite Games, Sumo, Leamington, Newcastle, Nottingham, Prune, Sheffield, and Warrington, and Secret Mode. Yeah, a lot of those I don't recognize. Chinese Room is a argument in computer AI, I know that. Let's see. The games that the Chinese Room has developed was Korsakova, Dear Esther, Amnesia Machine for Pigs, everyone's gone to the Rapture. And Little Orpheus. Okay, so it is not the company I was thinking of. Alright. That would have been a lot more of a news story, really, if Tencent had bought out that company. And in all fairness, I think that company is effectively close to being out of business anyways. Moving on, Gametsu has an article. Atlas Project Re Fantasy is progressing little by little. Surprises and big unannounced projects are in development and more. Which really is just a tease for a tease, as it were. If anything, that's basically Atlas saying we have nothing new to announce.
I go with the wind.
Got me feeling hungry.
Are you worth your weight in gold?
Yeah, I'm starting to get a little exhausted. It's about time to take another one of those power naps. I really wish I could get it back to sleeping for 6 to 8 hours in a row, though. Let's keep on going through the news. We still have a lot. Dragon Quest XII, The Flames of Fate, to shape the next 10 to 20 years of Dragon Quest, apparently. Good to know. So 12 might very well be the one to jump onto, or 13 might be the one to jump onto. Gametsu has the Famitsu review scores for issue 1703, which Shin Harayagami 3 was 31 out of 40, and Susanoo Japanese Mythology RPG for the Switch is 29 out of 40. So not a particularly good week for new games as far as scores. That is pretty awful. Okay. We need... Is this evolved? Yes, it is. Let's play this.
Ready for true combat?
At least we got our mark.
Hit that.
Talk more later.
Hit that. Suppose I could have played this and done damage immediately.
I like. Give me that.
I'm just gonna evolve this to try and protect it.
Over here, youngling.
Melty Blood type Lumnia Komiya Kashima trailer
Hunters out there.
is now available. That's another Melty Blood trailer. We won't watch it. Tsukuhime, A Piece of Blue Glass Moon, third trailer in Japanese box art. So yeah, I think that
Bring in more than a race.
I think my confusion here is that Tsukuhime is a visual novel and Melty Blood is the fighting game. And what happened is during that presentation, they showed both games because that was a really long presentation and Japanese people do that. Yeah, Tsukuhime, A Piece of Blue Glass is a visual novel. Looks slightly interesting, but yeah. There's definitely too much room for confusion in that setup.
I need more fear. More terror.
Got a job to do.
Okay. What do I want to keep alive? 1, 2, and then I guess I have to keep this one alive so I can then hit this one, so then I can evolve this one
One step closer to victory. Harder armor.
so we can
Steel
hit that.
yourself.
At least we got our mark.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Gametsu has the Psychonauts 2 story trailer. Pretty much everybody has the story trailer.
Armor has been
It
pierced.
seems to me like you're gonna be hanging out with your dad. This is your dad, and maybe your mom. I would assume that this is your mother.
I have to stop
This
standing
might be a sister or an older brother. I'm not sure these are other family members. They're all striped clothing, which makes it seem like they are from the circus, or they were all imprisoned. And so yeah, they have this whole story trailer for Psychonauts 2, and I will say it looks a lot better. There is an interesting twist, certainly with the accessibility factor, when you think about something. No, not the accessibility factor. There's an article that happened where they covered like accessibility as using that as a phrase to indicate the game is trying to be not triggering to the mentally like,
Loyalty is ironclad.
I don't want to say weak, but I feel like weak might be the only phrase to use here. Disturbed?
Too slow.
Or the
Ironclad.
disheveled might be a nice way to say that, but let's just go with mentally weak. Yeah. And I want to get back into the idea that Psychonauts 2 has an invincibility mode, and that because that's kind of expected. What I am afraid now, after seeing this article, is the idea that they consulted real psychologists, much like Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice consulted real psychologists, and then came out with the idea after that consultation that they should make an incredibly bad game. And that would be my concern, certainly, is that Psychonauts 2 may very well be an incredibly bad game.
I'm already a proper lady, you know. Is that how you treat a lady?
Well, that's too bad.
And so I guess I pretty much just have to leave it at that for this time, but yeah, I have deep and growing concerns with Psychonauts 2, whether they can actually make a game there that's going to interest me, or even if they can make a game that's going to interest the fans of Psychonauts, which there's definitely a cultish attitude around Psychonauts, but maybe not as big of a group as it may not be as big a group as you think. And they all may have aged and not really be that interested in Psychonauts. That is another thing that you potentially could suspect affects the guy in charge of Double Fine, is that he may very well just be in love with his own content so much that he doesn't even evolve with the rest of the creators and the rest of the game industry.
This town eats good folk for breakfast.
I would make a similar argument for, say, Cyan, the makers of the Myst series, is that they probably have severely dropped the ball to evolve their games along with the player base as the years have gone by. Moving on, a game called Dyschronia Chronos Alternate has been announced for virtual reality platforms. You turn back time, mysteries are a thing of the past. Let's see if we can skip this trailer around. Let's see what actual gameplay is here. It looks like a JRPG game, but this is definitely just a tease. Not really showing the gameplay. Remember there was that VR game or PlayStation VR game that came out where you were tied to a wheelchair and you had to tell this anime girl how to escape rooms and just like order her around. That game I'm not sure ever came out, and certainly I don't think it actually went anywhere or succeeded. It didn't seem like it was a particularly good, well designed game. And I wouldn't be surprised if Discronia is somewhat like that, where because of the limitations of VR, what they're trying to accomplish limits you severely more than it frees you. And in general, that's the problem with VR, is that you don't accomplish more with VR at the moment, you accomplish less.
Mother, father, come on.
Moving on, Video Games Chronicles says Fall Guys Season 5 will add 6 jungle-themed rounds when it arrives on Tuesday. I'll leave it at that. Let's see. Apparently, one person has been working on Psychonauts 2 for 4.5 years, which I wouldn't be surprised if more people have been working even longer on it. Longer than that. Here we have a game on Steam called Trenches, which looks like a psychological horror. You know, there is a twist here that might make this worth putting on the fall list. In a lot of ways, this very well may just be a walking simulator and not that good and an asset flip game, but we have not seen a lot of people try to set a game in World War II trenches, where the horror of war was on top of any other horrors you would add. $8.99, English full audio. Let's put it on the follow list. Let's see if people like it.
Let's speed things up. Too slow.
Let's see. Next we have a game called Existences. Existences. I guess that's how you pronounce that. There's a movie that I highly recommend everybody watch. Right after watching like The Matrix 1, or before watching The Matrix 1, I won't say which is better. I haven't actually done it myself, but you should watch those two movies, very similar to each other, and decide whether you like Existence better than Matrix. And if you don't want to watch Matrix, definitely watch Existence. This looks very weird, but the art looks like somebody's really trying and doing their own little art style, and I can call it more of an art style. It does feel like there's some actual gameplay here, although a lot of it looks like it's talking. $15 is really, really high though. They were made from visuals that were drawn and animated on paper, which that really shouldn't be a sales point. English. I'll put this on the following list. That would be very weird, certainly, to say, we've hired this artist, he doesn't know how to use any digital art forms, he's drawn everything on paper, then we've hired a second artist to scan in all of the first artist's creations and put it into a video game form. It feels like if you were to go and get a Monet painting or
There's a reason we're alive.
what was the surrealist? Dali. Yeah. If you were to go and get like a bunch of the Dali paintings and cut them up and put them into a video game, that'd be very weird if Salvador Dali was still alive. It's a little bit less weird when Salvador Dali is not alive, in all fairness, but it's still somewhat weird.
This is our way out.
No one gets past me.
This
Is my friend.
Too slow.
that.
Too slow.
Shutting down. Shutting down.
Of course, the problem with this is it apparently the developer and the publisher is this Ozzy Sneeden, which just sounds like a fake name. So if he drew everything in hand, then why was he able to then program a game? Like, he drew everything, then he taught himself how to program, I guess. But I'll put it on the follow list. It does look unique enough to deserve a look.
Wake up,
Verifying access.
Let's see. Video Games Chronicle, I don't know if this really is news. The latest Call of Duty Warzone ban waves target repeat offenders. Raven Software recently banned another 50,000 accounts. I mean, I still think it's inappropriate and rude to put out numbers of how many people you've banned and basically highlight that as a good thing.
Shines like a beacon of hope.
Because at the core of it, really all you're saying is that your game is either so popular that it encourages cheaters or rude people, or your game is just incredibly hackable and that encourages hackers. It doesn't really say a lot positive to say that you've made a game that is a den for scum and villainy, so much so that you've had to ban places. Nobody wants to be the dive bar that the cops show up 5 times a night at, and definitely don't want to be proud of that. Moving on, Gamma Sutra has an article. The mobile game company Scopely sinks $50 million into the trio of European studios, split up between Tag Games, Pixel Toys, and Omnidrone, which are based in Scotland, England, and Spain, respectively. That's a little too inside baseball to matter to me. A first-person puzzle adventure game called Faraday Protocol launches August 12th for the PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. We have a bit of a trailer to see what kind of game this is. Looks like a puzzle game. Could be something sort of like Portal. Could be something fairly different. Like games where you have a gun that shoots and connects circuits. We've seen a few of these, and I guess Portal is probably not the right comparison at this point. The Turing effect might be a better comparison as far as that type of game. Okay, Heavy Knight. Do this.
Allies, my
Lovely
friends.
day for a fight.
And then can't take more than 2 damage at a time.
Sow the seeds of war, reap the profit.
One step closer to victory.
Fear leads to strife. Strife becomes gunfire. This is jolly good fun. Is that another battle I smell?
We'll go ahead and end there.
Foul forces of darkness, bow before my tempest.
See if we can zoom in. Nope.
We need balance, and I'll provide it.
On to retreat.
There you go. So here we have the gamer.com, an article. This was the article I was talking about. Interview Double Fine on Psychonauts 2 accessibility and depicting mental health. Yeah.
Is what you make of it.
In all fairness, though, I can't really complain too much about Psychonauts 2 depicting mental health when,
Not sure if I
whether it was done jokingly or not, all of Psychonauts 1 really is depicting people with mental health issues of some sort. Maybe not downright complete psychosis, but mental health issues nonetheless.
More fear, more terror.
Is there a way to keep people, get rid of people? That one, and that one, and that one, I guess.
I did my bestest.
Die,
We'll
cretin.
go ahead and get rid of that.
Blow on, dear wind.
Come
Get rid of
some.
that.
Nothing
Get
scary
rid
with
of
allies
that.
by your side.
More corpses.
Shutting down.
Here we have a game on Steam called Konomono, which is a side-scrolling shooter game.
Damn.
Yep, doesn't particularly catch my interest.
You did good.
$5.99, English and Japanese. Let's see, I clicked on a couple of these links from envisioncommunity.co.uk, but I'm not using them as a news source anymore. Plus, the links I clicked on I don't think are particularly new information. Although this seems to be new. A Gwent Price of Power Thanid Coop expansion has been revealed, which I'm not sure really matters at all because I don't think anybody really is playing Gwent anymore, and that those Gwent expansions were either card expansions or for one expansion it was a story expansion that was kind of its own standalone story experience, which just allowed a lot of confusion to be created as far as what the Gwent experience really was. Neither one of them, neither the single player experience looked good enough to be worth the money, and the free to play or free to start card game experience wasn't really worth playing. Gwent as a card game is just too weird. The mechanics are just too out there, and there's just not enough cards or interesting art to justify that weirdness. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Gridler's Beach Season, which is just a Picross game. I can see the beginning of the end, $2.99, and that's good because while we may get lucky and get one more victory, we probably won't get 2 more victories, and we are still ending up taking about the same amount of time regardless of how fast I try to move, unless I just curate and don't cover games that come out on Steam at all. These streams will always be 2 hours and 30 minutes minimum.
Though centuries pass, I remember all.
Too slow.
You wouldn't.
Star Ocean apparently is like 25 or 35 years old at this point. On June 24th, the Star Ocean series portal website was relaunched. So it seems like they're going to try and do something with this JRPG series. Let's see. We have yet to really see anything. It's a Square Enix RPG, and I wouldn't be surprised if Square Enix just kind of ignores Star Ocean. We definitely are seeing some companies announce games and then lose interest in actually making the games once they start to have any real trouble, or announce games that they had no intention in the first place of ever actually making. Apparently there was an article out there saying that the Switch OLED profit margins would rise. This is probably in direct response. It was reported, or it was, I guess, guessed at, that it would only cost $10 more to manufacture the OLED model versus the original Switch models, but they're charging $350 versus $300. But now they've come out and said that the profit model would increase compared to Switch to ensure correct understanding among our investors and customers. We want to make clear that this claim is inaccurate, is the quote, which is to probably say it will increase the profit margins, but not by that exact amount, because it probably doesn't cost $10 exactly. It probably costs $9.69 or something like that, just enough off that they can claim that the claim is inaccurate. Yeah. The truth of the matter is, on a statement like this, is profit margins will either fall or rise unless it costs exactly $50 to add an OLED screen. And we know that it does not cost exactly $50 to add an OLED screen. But maybe, I don't know. I mean, I don't know how you don't come back and say that this is just one of those lies through confusion that companies like to do. Lies through semantics.
March on! Go, eat up!
I still expect to see Nintendo making more money on the OLED version. And honestly, I just don't think there's enough reason to even talk about the OLED version.
Are you ready for
If we want to talk about Nintendo, we should be talking about the latest Nintendo games that are coming out or not coming out, like Bayonetta 3 or Metroid Prime 4. If we don't want to talk about the Nintendo Switch, we should talk about the Steam Deck. If we don't want to talk about either one of those, there's plenty of games coming out for the PlayStation and the Xbox. In a lot of ways with the Steam Deck, if Valve stayed in the market of making computers, which arguably the reason why the previous Steam PCs didn't work is the claim is none of those developers wanted to sell at such a low margin for PC sales, and so there's this idea floating around that Steam PCs would have succeeded had the computer companies not been so greedy, which I don't know if that's really a valid argument or not. But it certainly would explain why Valve is directly releasing their own hardware now. But if we do get this offset setup where right about now or a year from now, because of the pandemic, we have Steam Decks released and Switches released, and then 2 or 3 years from now we see another upgrade or mid-generation upgrade to the Xbox and PlayStation, and then 3, 4, or 5 years from now you start to see the next Switch again. If it just always is happening in off years, that might work fairly well. Instead of having direct competition, I could see an argument where one Christmas you get a Steam Deck type computer, next Christmas you get an Xbox. Or worst case scenario, one year you get a Nintendo Switch and a Steam Deck, and then the next year you don't get anything. Or you wait a year on a Steam Deck, or you wait a year on this. I think you probably will, if Steam Decks become a thing, I think you probably will start to see a case of Steam Decks getting refreshed every year or so.
a challenge?
Sow the seeds of war, reap the profit.
Die, cretin.
Oh, we have to hit that, I suppose.
He is ironclad.
I lowballed you.
Here we have a game on Steam called Dane Squares, which just looks like Tetris. Just a low effort Tetris for 99 cents. Here we have a Human Aura Leo Lenji, which looks like a low polygonal Chinese game. $3, English and Chinese. Here we have a game called Thesis Mythological Hero, which it still looks too much like an asset flip game, unfortunately. $6.99, English and Portuguese, Brazil. A little bit more polish on something like this. The idea of playing as a Greek character like Theseus might be interesting. Alright, I'm going to jump into one last game here, but odds are we're going to not succeed, and then that'll be it for this stream. Here we have Magical Valkyrie Lyristia, which looks like it's an RPG Maker
There's a battle underway.
anime game.
Omateot, all
Looks
systems
like
online.
there could be some nudity that was censored out of this. I like this menu, but the actual game looks like nothing. The names seem a little weird. The art seems a little weird. Seems like you do walk around an RPG level, and then when you get into fights, you just actually go into kind of a turn-based RPG. $13.49. Yeah, here we have a game with nudity in it. Here we have a game with nudity in it. Here we have a game with sexual content in it. It seems to me this is the same publisher that's more known for putting out adult games, and they may at this point have given up on even having uncensored versions of games on Steam. Which, yeah, that is the accusation, certainly, is that the message is getting sent behind closed doors that uncensored games are not welcome on Steam, even though publicly Steam has said that they were going to let uncensored games on their storefront. I guess maybe they've given up on that thought. Here we have a game on Steam called AE86 Eurobeat Drift, which doesn't look like anything of interest. $1.49, bunch of languages. It's way too bright. Collection of colors. It's just neon colors all over the place. Here we have a game on Steam called To the Top of the Dream, which looks like it's a shoot 'em up mobile phone game port, if I was to guess. Either that or it's just a terribly designed shoot 'em up. $3.99, English and Chinese. Let's see. Guess you play this. Here we have a game on Steam called Legacy of Vayne, which just looks like an RPG Maker game of no interest. $4.99, English only. We have Paranormal Files Ghost Chapter Collector's Edition. Game Grumps is covering one of these games from Big Fish Games. Not watching it, but it is an interesting thought, certainly, as far as they're still working their way towards playing other kinds of games. This is $12.59, so Big Fish Games is still charging too much. English allegedly full audio, but I take that with a bit of a spoon of sugar, because it's not really that much audio typically in these hidden object games. Speaking of YouTube channels doing something different, apparently D&D Live is a thing, and it has a lot of celebrities who happen to play Dungeons and Dragons. Jack Black and Seth Green, a couple of names I noticed. And this time it was hosted by G4, which seemed fine, but it didn't really seem like it was really being run by the G4 celebrities, of which there's, I mean, arguably a lot of people at G4 that I don't recognize, but maybe that's their goal, is to get people from all different places watching G4 once it actually decides to be a real whatever it's going to be, whether it's a channel or just a YouTube thing. It more and more every day seems like it's just going to be a YouTube channel, and not any kind of thing that tries to be on TV or even a big YouTube channel. But yeah, they did this whole D&D Live thing, Dungeons and Dragons live thing, it seemed like nobody was really that warned was going to happen or interested in that it was happening. Didn't feel like it got particularly well advertised. And they still have the completionist, which is probably the biggest YouTuber get that I can guess for as a presenter for G4 or B4 G4, which that's cool and all, but I would have kind of expected some bigger names or just more names. I could almost make a better argument for more names than bigger names. Because like the completionist in particular, he had this whole group of people that he hung out with, and seems like there was a strategic breakup more than anything with that group of people, because they don't seem like they are doing their old content, but their old content was incredibly rare and infrequent anyway, so easy enough to not really expect any new content from them. The completionists in the Super Beard Bros content in particular got incredibly repetitive and boring, where they were doing the exact same scripted improv jokes. Like they sounded like they were improv jokes, but they were actually scripted because they were doing the same joke again over and over again. And so that you'd watch 3 or 4 games that they've covered, and they're basically doing the same joke over again, and they'd run out of new material. Whereas most comedians, that's why they do their Netflix special and do all of those jokes, and then they have to throw away all those jokes and work on new jokes for a new set, because they want it to all feel fresh and new as far as the content.
I need more fear, more terror.
Got a job to do.
We'll hold that one, and that one.
Loyalty is ironclad.
And then
One step closer to victory.
we'll
Harder armor. Steel
see if we can
yourself.
attack here and here.
Loyalty is ironclad.
Next, we have a game on Steam called the Insignia Project, which is tagged as a psychological horror game, which I don't know if I really believe there's a game here. Early access $1.99, third party EULA, English only. I'll stick it on the fall list. Suppose my ambition about doing a fall list cleanup has once again fallen flat. Here we have a game called Detective Story Reporter, which just looks like a horror RPG Maker game. 59 cents English and Russian. No interest in that. Here we have a game called Holt, which looks really dark. Action adventure game. Probably wouldn't want to play this. It's just too zoomed out for that pixel graphics. Early access, free to play, English only.
My armor's been pierced.
Gonna be released as chapters. Yeah, I think that's just way too many caveats for a game like that. Okay, I could play this, or wait next turn and play it. Meanwhile, is this evolved?
The dawn shines like a beacon of hope.
This is our last push.
Dawn always prevails
won't
over
give
the
him an
dark.
inch.
Dawn is upon us. Dawn is upon us.
Steel yourself. My armor's been pierced.
I do believe we have a case.
There we
smell
go.
suspicious.
I might be able to let us win. Here we have a game called Apocalypse, which is yet another Tetris game. Early access, $6.99, way too expensive. Here we have a game called Twin Stick Arcade, which looks like nothing of interest. $3.39 English only. This is really ugly looking graphics. Here we have a game called Phantom Train, which looks like nothing. $4.24 English and Russian. I guess this is trying to be PT, name confusion.
Setting reflectors.
Here we have a game called Walkabout Mini Golf VR, which doesn't look too bad, but it's VR and I think it's player versus player.
We will break
Yeah.
the new
Says it
dawn.
has single player, $14.99 English only. There might be an idea to doing mini golf in VR, but honestly I don't know if there's really an improvement for doing golf in VR or not. Put this on the follow list. We'll see. Okay. If I do this
You smell
and this,
suspicious.
and then play this.
The hour of judgment has come.
Then we can just end our turn. It'll kill everything else.
I never get a chance to speak.
Here we have a game on Steam called Lost at Sea, which is tagged as an adventure indie survival puzzle game.
Enough with these feeble-minded invalids.
There might be something here, but this might just be an asset flip game. It's published by Head Up Games, which is a fairly big publisher. English full audio. I guess I'll put it on the follow list. I'm also noticing that there's this Camp Packs Online 2021.
Beloved little
See what
sister.
that is. It's a collection of games on sale, I imagine. Get Trine 4. There's a lot of games here that are just coming soon. Was that Lamentation? Lamentium? Remothered Broken Porcelain is mixed reviewed. This game at $8.33 is probably still too expensive. Let's come over here and see if we can actually succeed.
Force like a beast from the void.
I love you.
You're weak. You're weak.
Nope, I've lost. Skatebird still isn't out? That's really delayed. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2. It's not too expensive at $8.99. Blaster Master Zero at $5.
FMD.
Zero Striker Gunvolt's not terrible.
Removed.
There you go. Here you have a Mighty Gunvolt 1 at 99 cents. That's a decent price for a game. 80% off. But yeah, the rest of these sales not striking me as particularly good. Yep, and unfortunately, I am just stuck needing one more victory, and I'm gonna have to struggle to get it. And I guess you could click show more, but I think I just want to check Steam's main front page and see what we're seeing here. The Steam Deck is $5 down. I thought it would have been a little bit more. At a certain level, it almost makes an argument to just pre-order the game, the Steam Deck, as a deposit and waste your $5 of deposit. This is an interesting setup, certainly, that they started showing, is the idea of having fight sticks plugged into your Steam Deck and then using that as a console to fighting games. Of course, even in this image, if you look at the top of the Steam Deck, you have one of those fight sticks plugged into the top of it, and you assume the other fight stick is plugged into the bottom of it. This image shows the white. This image shows black on the fight sticks. This image shows white. This image shows black. It seems fairly inconsistent. As far as other things being highlighted, you have VR chat, Valve Index, Dead by Daylight, Resident Evil characters, Monster Hunter Stories 2, Call of Duty Black Ops 2, FIFA, Halo Master Chief Collection, Graftopia, New World, Elder Scrolls Online. Bloodstained is 50% off on a sale. This lewd adult game, She Will Punish Them, is down to $9.59 and catching people's attention. I'd like to own Maneater, but at 40% off, that's still fairly expensive a game. And I guess slight discounts here as far as Red Dead and the Mafia trilogy. Slight sales on Control. Resident Evil 3 is $20. That's a decent price for Resident Evil 3. $15 for Resident Evil 2. Definitely both of those games on my wish list. Resident Evil 2, the deluxe edition, however, is still $20. What's this game? Night of the Dead. Let's see. Night of the Dead. Streets of Rage 4. Let's figure out what this is. Open that in a new tab. But, yeah. Players like me love Destiny 2, Resident Evil 3, Henry Stickmin Collection, and The Outer Wilds. That is an odd suggestion of games. Also, Sam & Max Save the World, which I already own. I guess maybe that's the remastered version or the original version. Will of Wisps, Little Nightmares 2, and the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Some of these suggestions don't really line up, in my opinion. I don't know what game I would have played that says I want to play Mass Effect specifically. Then we have a community recommends. Does feel like Steam has upgraded their website a little bit and made some changes, and they are slowly changing to a darker blue, but they're not really shifting a lot of these other colors to either white or a lighter blue, which I imagine a lot of this is going to end up turning into just white text on white background. And there's definitely room for improvement. Certainly there's definitely that. The discovery queue's not that interesting. Valve Index is being once again being promoted. And we have some suggested curators, which I did make a curator account, but didn't really do anything with it. And then just more recently updated games. Then you get down to this point. Yeah, I almost would see an argument. It's interesting that Yu-Gi-Oh! And Tabletop Simulator, two games that have been advertised to me a ton, are below the fold. So they've decided to put several games here that would have been above this fold point. And once you get below this fold point, it is pretty much black for a while, and then it gets back to dark blue. Yeah, if I have $5 to waste, I probably should reserve the Steam Deck game. So this game, Night of the Dead, is a tower defense game against zombies. It doesn't look that terrible. Like, it doesn't really feel asset flippy. It looks like there's a little bit of visual polish to this. It kind of feels like it has some single player element too, so it gets somewhat similar to that game that came out a while ago, and they won't have it mentioned here. It's a troll game or a goblin game. I can't remember the name of it though. But yeah, this already is on my fault list though, so I also didn't need to look at it. Mighty Gunvolt is on my wish list for 99 cents. I don't know if I really have 99 cents to spare at this point. That extra Prime Day certainly just ruined my my budget. It totally was in the wrong place, and frankly I spent a lot of money that probably shouldn't have been spent. But now is the time to recover from it. Like Prime Day in particular this year was I bought a lot more gadgets and gifts than I would have liked to, on top of buying home repair and remodel and upgrade stuff, because that's really where I think Prime Day succeeds better, is if you have this annual save for later shopping list where you just add something to your cart and then click save for later, and then when Prime Day comes around you look at all those things that you've saved for later and see if any of those are on sale, and if they're on sale that's the point where you purchase them. That works fairly well, and for me that is mostly home upgrade, home repair. It has been for the past couple of years, and honestly it became fairly obvious at the end of this year's Prime Day that had I just focused on things I had already planned on purchasing, it would have saved me an incredible amount of time, and I would have only missed out on a couple of really small things that don't really matter. Whereas I spent probably 3 days on Prime Day just looking at sales for very little reason. Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Raptor Boyfriend, a high school romance. This is a visual novel. It's obviously a bit of a weirder one. Put it on the following list. There is a visual novel, Dream Daddy, that was made by Game Grumps, and then Monster Prom was made in collaboration with Jesse Cox, a YouTuber, and Game Grumps are in being a dick, I believe. So, or maybe not. Maybe they're in House Party, I think. So, what that does is it creates a weird scenario where some of these visual novels and games or jokey games don't put me in the best position to really cover them, because they're also made by YouTubers, and I mostly don't want to cover games made by YouTubers because they tend to be pretty bad. We've already tried to cover a couple and they were pretty bad. Here we have a game on Steam called Zodiac DX, which just looks like a old school game, but it looks brand new. It looks like an old NES game. $2.54, English and Japanese. Here we have a game called Robo Worms, which, yeah, I don't really see a game here I want to play. $4.99, English online player versus player. Here we have a game called Bridge Fix, 2 = 3 - 1. Just looks like some kind of math puzzle game that, yeah, I don't think I'm really interested in. Seems like it would just be really complicated for no reason. $2.54. 5,000 puzzles, it says, which is way too many. English, French, and German. Yeah, you really shouldn't sell a game for $3 and give 5,000 puzzles. Break that down to 1,000 puzzles, sell it for 99 cents, make 5 sequels. That's much easier pill to swallow. Here we have a game called Guild of Darkstill, which it's a little pixely, it's a little zoomed out, but I think there might be a game here. I'm seeing a little bit of polish. $9.74, English only. We'll put it on the follow list. Here we have Valnorn Tactics Oathbreaker, which just looks like a low effort RPG game. It's $4.49, English only. Here we have a game called Fostering Apocalypse, which has a very sharp, jaggy appearance, and I think there's probably an artistic styling reason for that, and it's not just bad art, but I could definitely be wrong. Seems like you get this demon and then you have to keep the demon alive and foster it. $3.99, English only. It's an interesting concept, to say the least. Here we have a game called Akinofa. I suppose that's how you pronounce that. Akinofa. Yeah. Seems like you play as the shark that just kind of flies around. As a side-scrolling shooter element. That is definitely not what I was expecting for the looks of the game. The game absolutely looks like a Castlevania-style platformer, and doesn't play that way. $3.99, English, allegedly full audio. This is just way too off what's expected. You cannot establish a game that looks like a platformer and then have you fly around as a side-scrolling shooter. That just does not work. Here we have a game called Propulsion, which just looks like an asset flip parkour game, which we haven't seen too many of those lately. Here we have a game called Pasta Master, which looks like nothing of interest. $2.69, English only. Here we have a game called Seventh Chance, which is low polygon 3D model game. They're calling it an exploration puzzle game. Kind of walking simulator, I think. $2.54, English full audio. I think we can skip this. I'm not seeing anything unique or polished on these images. Here we have a game called Ghost Hunter's Corpse, which is already mixed with 218 reviews, so I can easily ignore that one. Which is a shame because some of this looks like it might have been interesting, but a lot of this also does definitely look like low effort horror asset flip content. Early access $17.99, English and French. See if we can find a negative review. First and foremost, I like the game. I vote no because the majority of people, this game isn't worth it. Not recommended if you expect a fully functional, polished early access game. You don't like grinding and spending 15 plus minutes per match to get XP points. Apparently this is some kind of local co-op game. It doesn't have any online, so I assume you're either says you're playing alone or in a team of 4 ghost hunters is how you can play. Next we have a game called Haunt Chasers, which visually looks slightly better polished. But yeah, all of these horror games potentially are nothing. $13.49. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt and give it a follow. Of course, every time I put something on the follow list, then I'm just making my job harder when I finally do decide to clean up the follow list. Here we have a game called Creepy Tale 2, which I guess the real question here, since this looks like an interesting kind of puzzle point and click adventure game, is there a Creepy Brothers Creepy Tale 1. If there is a Creepy Tale 1, was it well received? So, Creepy Tale 1 is on my wish list. It is rated very positively, so I don't see a reason not to go ahead and put this on the wish list since it already has 35 reviews. Although it is kind of interesting that a game that came out just on Friday, 3 days ago, or 2 days ago, well, I guess 3 days ago, it came out on Thursday. It is interesting, though, to say the least, that it has 65 reviews. So, are we hitting a point potentially where we are seeing games that are getting cheated reviews and people are like paying for positive reviews on Steam? Next, that might be the case, it might not. We'll just have to wait until somebody gets exposed. Here we have this game, Exidio, the kaiju game. I don't want to play a kaiju game that is blocky like this. It looks like Roblox. It's early access, $9.99. I'm going to have to say no to that. I would love to play a kaiju game. I don't want to play one that looks like Roblox, though. I want it to look realistic. Probably hyper-realistic. I want to see scars form when a kaiju scratches itself, and I want to see the claws get worn down on hard rock or things like that. Here we have a game called Shape Touches, which just looks like a mix of garbage visuals and assets. Yeah. Say it's a simulation game of future public spaces. It's free. I guess the price is right then. It's made by an architectural exhibition in Venice, apparently. English only. Or Venezia. Whatever Venezia is. I think that's Venice. But yeah, I really wouldn't trust an architect to make a video game of interest. Here we have a game called Helios, which looks like it's a VR chat game with a bunch of asset flips. Which we all know where this goes, and it never goes anywhere of interest. $9.99, English full audio. Bunch of random people in different avatars. Here we have a game called Magical Adventures, which, okay, this looks alright. Top-down twin-stick shooter. Maybe it's a bit slow. Maybe there's not a lot of variety here. But I think it deserves a follow, just to make sure it's mediocre. $9.99, English only. I'll give that one a follow. We have about 10 more games. Here we have a game called The Secret Blue Forest, which I kind of think with more polish this character would work, but the low polygonal visuals definitely don't work with any of the other environment. $1.19, English only. Here we have a game called Veg Out Crew, which looks like it's a platforming game where you play as a vegetable. It doesn't look that interesting. $2.99, English, allegedly full audio. Here we have a game called Stefano RPG. We're just burning through these real fast. This looks like nothing, really. Official desktop client for Stefano RPG, and something about this game is also open source because, yeah. Software you're downloading is an open source desktop client developed for Electron.js Skulls that help you to connect to these stuff. No RPG servers in a frictionless and secure manner, and to bridge the gap between progressive web applications and native games. Yeah, I don't know if anybody is even making progressive web applications anymore. That was something that sounded like it might catch on, but of course didn't catch on. But Microsoft was pushing that for a while. Here we have a game called World for Two, which looks like some kind of, well, they tag it as transhumanism. Looks like it's a platforming adventure game where you maybe jump between different worlds. Or maybe you don't jump between different worlds. I think we had maybe seen this game announced before. $12.59 is fairly expensive. Bunch of languages here. Guess you have to put it on the follow list and see. You like collect the DNA of animals instead of fighting them. Here we have a game called Code Angel, which, yeah, it just looks like an asset flip first-person shooter. This is like the first-person shooter asset flip game I think we've seen today. English, allegedly full audio, nothing of interest. Interesting, yeah. Normally we would have seen a lot more asset flip first-person shooters. Some of those horror games may have been asset flip first-person shooters also, but they were also horror games. Here we have a game called Demon Slayer Akagi, which, yeah, doesn't really look like anything of interest. $3.99, bunch of languages. Here we have Halloween Patchwork Trick or Treat. Excuse me. I'm gonna mute myself. Sorry about that. Clearly I'm wearing out my voice once again, doing too much talking. It's really early to be putting out a Halloween game. This doesn't look terrible as a simplistic jigsaw puzzle game, which is, I assume, all it really is. You grab pieces and you fill in the missing pieces, which it's basically a jigsaw puzzle game. $2.99, bunch of languages. And then we have finally Abandoned Croxon Mansion, which is tagged as a walking simulator and looks like an RPG game, but doesn't seem to really play that way if they're calling it a walking simulator. 59 cents, English only. Okay, and with that, I will now check my Twitter feed and see if there's any new news that has happened in the 3 hours that we've been streaming. And if there isn't any new news that's happened, then we will call it a day and we'll talk about we'll talk about whatever comes out as far as news on Wednesday. Yeah, there is definitely a possibility that now that we're fairly far away from E3 that we'll get, I think there's an EA Play event that's going to happen. We could definitely see a lot of announcements. Apparently Ubisoft has revealed a free-to-play first-person shooter called Tom Clancy's X Defiant, which we'll talk about that. Gamma Sutra's got another article called Accessibility Ideas and Testing Tips from Dreams developer Media Molecule. The the problem with Gamasutra is that they often are the place where video game developers go to talk to each other, and they get to act as the source of news, thus they get to act to affect the conversation. And so what they seem to be pushing now is the idea of accessibility as a way of making games completely unchallenging, to the point where games are going to stop being video games and start being just these interactive movies, or not even interactive movies. And yeah, that seems to be the goal of maybe Gamasutra, or maybe someone else in Gamasutra is just echoing it. More likely it's the goal of a few very specific game developers who I would suspect are also crazy SJWs. And yeah, in a funny way, this might be the one way you could severely hurt or destroy the video game industry, which is bigger than the movie industry, is by taking out the one thing that makes video games, which is the interactivity. And then at a certain level, I certainly do want to see some level of accessibility. There are definitely games out there that are way too darn hard, and you just can't play them. Dark Souls, Demon Souls, great example of games that maybe not even that hard, but just not easy enough to let the average player make it from the beginning to the end. I didn't make it through Dark Souls all the way to the end. And so, yeah, there are definitely games there. We don't need to create a split between games that are Souls-like because they're too hard or they're obscure, and games that are then accessible, as a phrase, because they're super easy. There is also some artificial difficulty in games. Playing Dead Space 3, there are some points where you just have to tap A and do QuickTime events, and in those sequences it would have been better if it was just a cutscene and there was no actual difficulty. One of the other things that, because of vertical sync being an issue, when I had vertical sync turned off in a sequence, the fire that was supposed to spread slowly spread a lot faster, because the physics engine and the rendering engine are connected, and thus I could not escape the fire in time. Because of that, I had to turn on vertical sync to slow down the frame rate and make the entire game chug at a considerably slower frame rate just to be able to escape a fire. And that's certainly annoying. But then fairly quickly after that, I had a cutscene that was supposed to be very emotional and impactful, and instead of it being emotional and impactful, I'm tapping A like an idiot to get the QuickTime event to work. Okay, so we've got a few articles here we'll talk about, then we'll call it a day. A new Ubisoft first-person shooter called X-Defiant combines Splinter Cell, Ghost Recon, and The Division and more. This free-to-play shooter is fast-paced firefights meets punk rock mosh pit. This is not really what I expect to see when I see, like, Splinter Cell. Like, that they would just be punk rockers in a first-person shooter game. These characters definitely don't feel like Splinter Cell, or that they'd even be in the same Tom Clancy universe, or even these characters would be in the same universe. Almost certainly this was just a free-to-play game that they decided to put in the Tom Clancy universe because they've got the rights to it, and they might as well do it for name association. But like The Division and Rainbow Six and Splinter Cell all felt like a universe that was at least separated by distance or by time. So it's very weird to have these like shield devices and grenades and plague devices all together. But at a certain point, I also just don't know. Like, I've never played any of the Tom Clancy games, so this might fall very much in line with the Tom Clancy games. It might fall very much in line with the Tom Clancy stories. I could just be wrong. But on first appearance, I'm not impressed by that. Gamatsu had that same article. Let's see. The game Road 96 launches August 16th, according to Gamatsu. The Hitchhiker bundle includes a prologue ebook. Is this the game where you get in the car with some weirdos? Or is this a different game where you get in the car with some weirdos? Yeah, I think this is a different game than the one I've seen. I feel like I've seen 2 or 3 games where you get on the road and you hitchhike. And this one seems like this is the 3rd game I've seen like that. Which, I don't know if somebody just went on a hitchhiking experience and ended up pitching the same game concept to 5 different developers, or what. Hitchhiking used to be a fairly common thing to do in the old days, but it's not really done nowadays, just for the standard fear of random strangers. Whereas, honestly, you're probably as safe with a random stranger hitchhiking as you are riding with somebody you know. But certainly it doesn't get reported that way. And then finally, Gamatsu has Danganronpa Decadence trailer, Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp key artwork, which I guess Danganronpa Decadence is the 3 main titles, which would be Trigger Happy Havoc Anniversary Edition, Goodbye Despair Anniversary Edition, which I guess is not really on Steam, and version 3 Anniversary Edition. It also includes Danganronpa S Ultimate Summer Camp, which is a board game that I think they took out of either the 3rd game or the 2nd game and expanded into its own thing. Here we can see the summer camp. Once again, mostly the anime girls and somewhat of a bikini picture. And this art has characters from several of the games. So, yeah. Guess we could watch this trailer. This is mostly for the Switch, which is really not a terrible place to play Danganronpa. I would hope that... Oh, I guess the board game includes everybody. I kind of would hope, though, that you would have the 2nd game and the 3rd game take place in a different school or different environments. I think it does, but there were definitely some images there that made it seem like maybe they return to the school and reuse those background locations. It really wouldn't change the gameplay that much if you are just going through the same school over and over again, Hope's Peak Academy. But also it would feel a little bit lazy. I thought for a second that was an announcement of something new, but actually it's just key art for something we already knew about. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a whole bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.